Anne Widdecombe was murdered in her own home. She was bludgeoned to death and she died all alone. And for 4 days, the police that were running that investigation were telling the British public one thing while sitting on something completely different. Now, this is not up for speculation. That's their own timeline. I'm going to walk you through it minute by minute, and then I'm going to tell you the one theory doing the rounds right now and why you should be throwing that straight in the bin, because I'm not going to be insulting this audience by feeding you some slop that can't be backed up. Wednesday lunchtime, Anne Widdecombe is attacked in her own home in Haytor. It's on the edge of Dartmoor. The police believe it happened around 12:30 in the afternoon. Thursday morning, her gardener finds her body. Now here's where it gets interesting, because nothing was taken from that £600,000 property, nothing at all. And yet Devon and Cornwall Police's first move, their first public line of investigation, is that she might have disturbed a burglar who took nothing from a 78-year-old woman in broad daylight. And then Saturday nights, a few days later, they arrested a man, not locally, but in Rotherham, South Yorkshire. That's over 200 miles away from the crime scene. Sunday, they front the cameras with Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman standing there and tells the country,
"At this point, there is still no information to suggest that this is a terrorism-related incident."
Then a day later, on Monday, it was a total reversal. Counter-terrorism policing takes over the entire investigation. On their words,
"This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire."
The suspect, a 28-year-old, gets rearrested, not for murder this time, but for the commission, preparation, or instigation of acts of terrorism. Tuesday, the head of the counter-terrorism policing, Lawrence Taylor, he stands up and he says,
"It is clear that this was a targeted attack."
And when he was asked point blank if Reform UK was the target, guess what? He refused to answer. It took 4 days to come from burglary to a targeted terrorist attack. And now the top counter-terrorism police officer is refusing to rule out that this was aimed at Reform UK. Now this is the part that nobody's talking hard enough about. Reform UK's Gwen Towler came out and said the police tried to, his words,
"Looks like they are more concerned about massaging public opinion and public mood than they are about doing the job."
And look at the sequence again. The local police spent 4 days actively steering the public away from any political or terror angle, whilst the man they've arrested is 200 miles away, according to the Mail and the Times, with communist literature and ideological material sitting in his house. You don't stumble in that story by accident. Either Devon and Cornwall police were criminally slow, or somebody decided that the public wasn't ready to hear that a woman connected to Reform UK have been targeted for her political beliefs and murdered over a weekend news cycle. You can pick whichever one you think's worse. Neither one is good, to be fair. Now, I've had people sending me the same line all week. Russian literature in his house, so this is a Russian operation. It's the same playbook as we've seen with all the things with Ukraine. I'm not going to do that, and here's exactly why, so you can make up your own call. Russian communist literature is almost certainly means that Marx, Lenin and the whole political tradition was found. That's not the same thing as a laptop full of messages straight from Moscow. Nobody, and I mean not one outlet, not one police source, has produced a single shred of evidence connecting this suspect to the Russian state, to any intelligence service or to a foreign handler of any kind. So if I stood here and told you that this was state-sponsored, I would be doing exactly what I criticise the mainstream media for doing. And that's inventing a headline because it's a better story than the truth. And the honest answer right now is this looks like homegrown terrorism, far-left, anarchist, Antifa, or a single issue ideology like the trans mafia ideology. And these are the categories that the British counter-terrorism police track separately from jihadist or far-right cases.
They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to hold their throats and get rid of them all.
So that's what the Guardian's own sourcing does point to. It doesn't point to Moscow. And don't let anyone, and that's me included, hand you a Kremlin plot that's dressed up as this fact when the actual scandal is sitting right in front of you. A woman who spent decades as one of the most outspoken conservative voices in British politics is murdered allegedly for her politics. And the police force were being running about, spending 4 days trying to talk the country out of that conclusion. This is a story about institutional failure, about a police force either badly out of its depth or actively managing the narrative. That's provable, that's on the record, and that's the line I want you all to clip. Now, Anne Widdecombe spent 40 years saying things that people didn't want to hear, and it would be one hell of a thing if people investigating her death spent 4 days or more doing the exact opposite. I'll be back on this case when there's a charge, a name, or anything more solid, not before. But in the meantime, please subscribe, share, comment. What do you think the ideology is? And I will see you on the next stream. Thank you for watching.
I've got very little trust left now in parliamentary processes. And if you look at this government, which has a majority on that committee, if you look at this government, look at the way that it's reacted when it's felt vulnerable, changes to political donations, cancelling local elections, we all remember that, going for votes at 16, loosening the voter ID requirements, you just name it. I mean, they react in such a way that is geared all around self-preservation now. Nigel is challenging that establishment.